Welcome to another Kundalini After Dark session. I'm your host, Brent Spirit, here today in the Zoom room. We've got 22 in the Zoom room, handful tuning in on YouTube as well. Thank you all so much for joining me live tonight. We'll see where our conversation goes. I have a brief share. It's a bit of a technique, a healing technique, a powerful one that I'd like to share with you and see if that sparks any conversation tonight. Today, we are meeting to discuss, of course, Kundalini awakening, the Kundalini After Dark sessions. Very simple idea. I share a little bit to spark some conversation. And then I open the floor up for the people that are here live to share what's on their mind. And so we can take our conversation in any direction, really. We'll let it breathe, let it have a life of its own. This is an opportunity to share, to get questions answered from myself or the group, to feel heard, to celebrate, to vent, to get connected with others going through this journey. So if you're listening to the recording in the archive, you can join us for the next Kundalini After Dark session. The link is in the description. Check it out, brentspirit.com, along with links to many other things. I've got a link to a free Kundalini Fundamentals crash course as well. I like to see that as a bit of an onboarding course if you're new to all of this and want to get up to speed with what's going on and how to get through this. Of course, we've all got different ideas, different ways of looking at this process together. So we come together to share notes. I'm not the final word. I don't have all the answers, and that's why I have all of you here with me so we can explore and unpack this together. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for all of your support, your donations, your engagement online. I appreciate that all so very much. Just recently, about a week ago, passed the 10-year anniversary of the major Kundalini rising experience that took place for me back in 2015. So I put together a 10-year post Kundalini awakening update video, which will be out soon. So you can look out for that. A bit of a lengthy one. It's about an hour and a half. I go into some detail about my journey, my story, and things that I haven't really shared elsewhere. So you can look out for that. What else do I have to share here? Yes, of course, no medical advice or professional counseling or psychotherapy here tonight. We're just meeting as lay people to have a spiritual conversation on the internet. So please keep that in mind. Let's get into it here. So as I was saying, a powerful technique, healing technique, and that sort of thing. And I'm not really big on techniques per se. I think a lot of this is just very intuitive, organic, natural. Our system knows what this process is and how to carry it out. And so basically, the ultimate technique is to just relax and trust in the wisdom that's within your system already to help you out with this process. But the other day, I was sitting in meditation and I got really deep. It was a really deep, beautiful, peaceful meditation. And in my style, I like to constantly be engaging in ongoing work and maintenance and seeing where else can I continue to tidy up, to address, what else can I shine light on, even if things are going well for me. I've over my journey, I've come to understand that I'm safe here, to feel whatever may come up, to look at whatever may come up. I've understood that I'm safe, and I've understood that if I just take a look and feel and experience what's within me, even if it's dark, uncomfortable, if it's the shadow, by doing so, I benefit in the end. So I'm very much on board with that process. And so this technique that I want to share with you is very simple, very, very simple. Sometimes when we're sitting in our meditation or in our prayer or in our practice, our sadhana, we may ask for, the divine to give us something positive. Bring me peace, bring me strength, bring me the answer, bring me clarity, bring me into connection with you, God, the universe source, however you want to call it, Shakti. Show me you're present, give me a manifestation, something positive. And that's great. And if we ask in that way with emotion behind it, often very quickly, our prayers, our asks are answered. But in this meditation for me, things are going really well. And I had this question come up in me, which was, you know, God, Ma, Divine Mother, the way that I like to relate with this force, is that show me the parts of me that still need to be addressed. Show me some blocks that I have. Show me the shadow that I can work on. I want to face it. I want to see it. Show me what I can deal with. So that was my technique. And immediately I was, I had a meeting with the inner teenager. the inner teenager. So not the inner child, we think about the inner child a lot, but actually the inner teenager. And I felt the sharp, not super painful, but a sharp discomfort in my chest. And that's where this inner teenager kind of lives. And I met him there, and he was actually wearing, I had this like green hoodie that I used to wear a lot and had like matching green shoes, and he was wearing those clothes. And there he was, and he's depressed. God, at this age, I was very depressed. And so I met him there, and I found him actually, um, what I noticed was that that current version of myself was frozen in time, frozen in that very unsafe, uncomfortable, frightening place that he was in. And he was continuing to, and all this time he has been continuing to try to take the wheel of life, of my life, and control and keep me safe. He was trying to still fight. He was trying to engage with as much wisdom as he has, through being skeptical and doubtful of anything that could be foreign or potentially uh, harmful to him. And I saw that this poor guy, this poor teenager, he was still, thinks that we're living back in that time, so many years ago. And so he came up, and I was just, a lot of compassion came forth for him. And I just investigated and inquired into, had a conversation with him, and I could see, back then he had completely abandoned any sense of religion, any sense of spirituality, any sense of anything far out at all. And of course, being a teenager, he knows everything, right? And so he knew that spirituality, that the non-physical, that the idea of God, the universe, all of this was just nonsense. And he was still clinging to that idea. And I found that was a source, and it continues to be even in this moment, but it was a source of a lot of tension, inner tension in me throughout this whole journey. Because I had this really dedicated teenage part, that was angsty, that was boisterous, and that had really dug his heels into a stance of life as a dangerous place. It was a stance of cynicism, a stance of materialism and atheism. And that was his perspective. And I found that that was, and like I said, continues to be, and perhaps even talking out with you here, I'm working with him some more. But, there's a point of a lot of tension in me. Because here I am, of course, Brent Spirit. I literally gave myself the name Spirit here doing all this, the spiritual awakening show and all this. And yet there's like a significant part of me that's been active this whole time who believes in none of this, who wants nothing to do with this, who think this is all crazy and nonsense. And so you can imagine the tension that, exists in this system. So anyway, it was nice to have an encounter with him in this way, a direct meeting with this part that's stuck in an older paradigm. And like I said, a lot of compassion came forth because the poor guy was just trying to keep the system safe, just trying to navigate in a way that he knew best. And so what did I do? Did I get upset with him? No, of course not. Of course not. I talked to him. I said, "Hey, look, I appreciate you so much. Like you're really committed to a perspective and to an attitude that, you feel is helpful and that's commendable." And I validated him and said, "Of course, that makes sense. That makes sense. Considering all that you've gone through, it makes sense that you would take such a stance and have such an attitude. But let me bring you up to speed. Let me tell you how things have gone and how things are now. And let me see if you'd be willing to give me a chance." And so I talked to him, I held him, I gave him a hug, I just brought him up to speed. And in doing so, the warmth of my love, it seemed to kind of unfreeze him from that state. And I could see him becoming a little bit more open to the idea that perhaps there is something more here going on, that perhaps the universe is a friendly place, that God is friendly, and that things are actually working out in some interesting way that we can't always understand. And so he began to become more open to that and get on board with that a little bit. And from what I understand and know about, this great system, internal family systems, this great healing modality, it's very popular lately. It's very, very effective. And it's very, very spiritual at its core. We have these various parts of our system that come up from various times in our life, and they play different roles. And often, that teenager part, it's not that we want him to die. We actually could use him because he's got that fire, that drive, that curiosity, and that commitment that many, young boys have, and we could put that to use. And so I said, what kind of job can we give you? You're very focused, you're very curious, you're engaged. Why don't we give you a new job? And so together, he and I are now looking for how we can put him to work in a way that uh, doesn't have to be in tension with what's going on here in this moment. And so that's something that I want to share with you. I don't always have to ask for some positive blessing or healing or peace. We can actually ask to be shown the uncomfortable aspects of ourselves, knowing that if we're shown that, then we can work with it. And I think those are prayers that get answered immediately. The moment you're willing to say, God, let me feel a little bit uncomfortable because I'm trusting in the process, God says, oh, yes, absolutely. Let's get to work. Let's lay it all out. And so these uncomfortable parts may arise, memories may arise, ideas may arise for you to work with it very quickly, very, very quickly. So sometimes we're asking God, God, please bring me relief, bring me, the answers and whatnot. But instead, maybe you ask God, show me how to bring myself relief. Show me how to move through any confusion on my own. I'm willing to put in a little bit of work. And I think God meets us halfway, if not more than halfway, and helps us out. So that was a recent experience I was having, still ongoing here. I can feel him kind of also getting soothed a little bit, just talking it out here, right? I can kind of get the sense that he's kind of taking note of all that's happening here. And like I said, a little bit more unfreezing is happening. And so that's like a really powerful thing that I wanted to share. If you like that type of work, like I was saying, IFS, internal family systems, very, very compatible with this process, with Kundalini awakening. Of course, if you find a therapist that's trained in that modality, can be very, very effective. But even the book written by the author, No Bad Parts, it's a book that he wrote for, the mainstream audience so that they can engage in this type of work themselves, no bad parts. And in the title, it's right there, right? No bad parts, right? That teenager, that atheist, cynical teenager, he's kind of dark and depressed. Um, you know, I was thinking back, yeah, at that time, my favorite band was Children of Bodom, which is like a death metal band dedicated to writing songs. They have entire albums about like a mass murder that took place in like Finland, and like their whole band is dead. And this was the type of music that I would listen to. I was really dark and just kind of in a really dark place. And so even that, not a bad part of myself. No bad parts. Even that has purpose. And if we can offer love and compassion, it can help to transform those parts into something that's a bit more compatible. It feels more comfortable in our system. It's more seamless. It's more aligned. It's more integrated. And that's the next, step. Well, it can be one of the next steps on your journey. It is for me, at least at this time. So I'll leave you with that. I'm curious if that brings up any thoughts, any ideas people have for people that are having similar experiences with their own healing. Of course, we can take our conversation in any direction. I just share here to spark some conversation, to give you something. Maybe you've come tonight with something really important you want to share on your mind. Maybe it's a question for myself or the group, something to celebrate, something to vent about. We can explore together. Like I was saying, check out the links in the description. I mentioned, therapists with IFS training. Uh, KundaliniAwareness.org is the website that I was inspired to create with a directory of licensed mental health professionals with Kundalini awakening experience. Not all of them may be trained in IFS, internal family systems, but many of them are likely familiar with that work. And nonetheless, they're there to support you if they happen to be in your area. So you can check that out. KundaliniAwareness.org. March 2026, we're having a Kundalini awakening meditation globally. So you can join us. It's Saturday, March 28th, if I'm not mistaken. Check it out, register. You'll get the email with the link to join us. So let's see what's coming up for everybody tonight. Sunny P types in the chat, Brent, materialism wouldn't have the same ring to it. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Let's hear from Molly.
Hi, everyone. Um, I've had internal family system therapy for 4 years and very helpful when when it was going on. But back then I didn't have like all the Kundalini stuff, and then I stopped, and even I was very helped by it. And then I just want to share a most recent experience with addiction recovery where that came up. And it was just like very early on in addiction recovery. I'm still early on, but back then it was even earlier. I was just having severe withdrawals. It just like I just crave the thing. I just want to use it. Like I don't want anything else, and I just have very hard time doing anything else in life. And I was just like in a moment of desperation, and because in like addiction recovery, you like call people, you ask them for help, and so on. And I called multiple people. I called my sponsor, and they were like, "Oh, whatever." It didn't work. It's just I was just like still desperate, and as like a last resort, I just prayed. It didn't occur to me, but I just went down to my knee and I just prayed instead of using. And I just like was on the floor and praying for 20 minutes. And and then it just occurred to me, you know what, I can pray for 5 hours. I can pray for, until I fall asleep or whatever. Like I can pray endlessly. It doesn't have to end, I don't have to ever use my addiction. And so I prayed and prayed, and then what's happening in my mind and my body is just like this this like catastrophic misery unbearableness. Like it's like a horrible thing. And I just had a really hard time like to just be with it, to relate to it, to love it or anything, because I'm so taken up by that misery. And and then I just prayed, continue. And then what happened is that the IFS therapy sort of came in, like it just like, oh, this is just a part, like this catastrophic misery, horrible dying feeling. That's just the part. And so I just like, oh, hi, how are you? Oh, good to see you. And I was just like talking to me myself as my therapist, like, oh, good to know you. Can you tell me more about yourself? That sort of thing. And then suddenly there's that like distance and that space with this catastrophe. And then I just was able to just relate to that part.
Mm.
And I'm no longer like taken over by it. And yeah, and that's how then I feel better. I was like, now I like recognize that aspect of being is just like, oh, that's just that. It's
Mm.
just a part. Um, yeah. So I just
Yeah.
want to share that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Molly. Yeah, it's just a part, but not just a part. It's not a bad part, I would add. Yeah, it's all of them are just trying to protect us, trying to make us feel better, really, really. And that's what we find. Thank you so much for sharing. Let's hear from Lori.
Um, yeah, I just wanted to add to about internal family systems and parts work. It wasn't actually something I'd heard of until after my awakening, and I can't tell you how much it has helped with my own healing. And I even took it a little bit further where I sort of recognized that there are other parts of me that I can see, like my emotional body and my mental body and my ego. I even gave them names. And it was a really great way for me to be able to kind of lovingly detach a little bit instead of feeding into things that would come up. It's like I could kind of take a step back a little bit. And the same with, I would say, like my inner children, where there's these parts that come up. And I realized, like with negative self-talk, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm not talking to myself. I'm talking to like a younger version of me. And once I framed it that way, like the negative self-talk almost immediately stopped because it was like, that's the last thing that I want to be doing. And so I started it's almost like tricked myself in a way, except I don't really want to, because I feel like it does feel very real to me. But it was like a way to get myself to stop having these negative behaviors in a way that was just very organic where I wanted to do it. And it was so helpful with so many parts of myself. So I just wanted to share that as adding to, just how helpful I've found that to be.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lori. Question for you. Did you find that that self energy, do you find that it activates anything in you energetically?
I actually kind of it was almost like I called it like a mass soul retrieval, where I kind of went looking for all of these like hidden parts. And that actually it was almost like too much. It was like a lot at once, and I felt all of these very vulnerable parts show up that I had to like put a pause on a lot of things in my life and really like kind of tend to that, and felt like a lot of there was a lot of like kind of like things got a little bit, almost a little weird for a while. It felt like they had so much power, and we had to learn to like work together, kind of like you said, finding like jobs for them and helping them to integrate and feel safe and not feel like they did need to like take the wheel. And so, yeah, there was a whole lot that kind of came up there, but once it started to sort of settle down a bit, it was I was so much more even, and yeah, so yeah, very, very powerful stuff.
Yeah, sounds like it. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, it takes time. It takes time to meet our parts and map them all out, and yeah, it can't be rushed. It can't be rushed. Some of them aren't also trusting of this process as well, and so we have to kind of ease into relating with them in these new ways. Yeah, but very, very powerful as Lori was sharing. Thank you, Lori. Let's hear from Angelina.
I wanted to share an experience that I have been going through, and I'm not sure I need to give a heads up about it, but I found myself over a period of time making plans as if I was dying. And so I became interested in making amends with people. I became interested in planning a memorial service, and I kind of went down that path and intuitively said, there's something else going on here. And I started to do a little bit of research, and I went back to Nicholas's book on the saffron tiger and read more about ego death and read about how your body and your mind and your emotions don't know that it's ego death and interprets it as death, as a premonition that you're dying. And so I kind of went this route of thinking I was dying until I had the awakening that I'm not dying. This is ego death that I'm in the middle of. And I need to deal with this differently than if I was physically dying. But I had read about it in the past and just vastly underestimated the emotional and mental and all of the physical, spiritual reactions, because you think you're dying. You think you're dying. And so you respond as if you're dying. And so I raise it simply as a acknowledgement of what happened to me and the fact that I very much underestimated its power, very much underestimated its power. Some of what you wrote was very helpful. Some of what Nicholas wrote was very helpful. I actually got to talk to him a little bit about it. And so that's just kind of information along the way for anybody else.
Yeah, Great. Thank you so much for sharing, Angelina. Very interesting. I see some parallels like, yes, ego death, but also if you're making amends with people in your life, that also is part of,
Yes,
addressing this ego, right?
yes,
Ah, very interesting. Yeah. I've heard from some others who have had similar themes come up. Some quite literally had been given a date. This is the date you will die. Prepare
yeah.
yourself. And when that date comes, they don't physically die, but there's a significant spiritual death and rebirth that takes place, which takes them by
Well,
surprise.
it also had, as it turns out, and I was not still enough to realize the implication, but all of this happened weeks before my birthday, and it cleared out a couple of days before my birthday. And it was like, okay, look at the synchronicity of that whole thing. It was just, as I said, it was just fascinating. It was a really fascinating process.
Yeah, incredible, incredible. Yeah, yeah, and these themes are there throughout all the traditions in some way or another. And there's this idea of shamanic dismemberment. Sometimes we may get visions of our entire body being chopped
Yeah,
up, which represents that death and,
yeah,
and rebirth. And if we don't understand that, it can be very scary, right? What are these
yeah,
images that I'm getting, these visions? Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Yeah, one of my favorite poems, I think it's by Basho. If it's my favorite, I should know who it's by. But anyway, it says, "Die while you were alive and be absolutely dead. Then do what you like. It's all good. Die while you were alive."
The other thing, which again, I'm not sure why I'm being inspired to talk about it. I have, I put the phrase in quotes, I have come out to a number of doctors that I've worked with now from being very, very conservative about talking about it at all because I'm in a corporate setting. I'm not going to say I'm in a small town because I'm not. I'm not in a small town, but I'm in a city where my name is out there. And so I'm very careful with who I share information with. But I finally said, it's got to help for somebody else who goes through this to have doctors understand because they have seen physical changes and they've said to me, what are you doing? Why is this? And it's like, okay, you need to be aware of something. Sit down. I'm going to explain this to you. And I usually hand them a book. I hand them somebody's book and say, you can read about it. And if you have any questions about it, but there are people like me out there who don't necessarily know what doctor to go to, or there's a whole medical profession who's not as aware of this. And my thank God my psychiatrist I found years ago who was Hindu and so understood what I was going through. But again, I think just I mean, there's a certain, I feel like, and I say this humbly, there was a certain level of courage in doing that. But the more people I talk to, the more I'm saying this is part of what this journey is about. The journey is not about being in a closet with this. This journey is about making it easier for everybody else on this journey.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for your courage. But yeah, yeah, that's what I feel as well. And if this is, I mean, as we know, not even if, we know this is the ultimate truth and experience for a
Mm,
human being. And so, the truth will prevail, right? It will
mm,
prevail. Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Let's hear from David.
Thank you, Brent, again. And hi, everyone. Yeah, Joseph Campbell talks about the dark night of the soul, of course, and that is the death of the ego. And, with great compassion, I can certainly um, ditto that, where in the hologram, which seems very real at the time, I was stabbed and shot and, covered in pitch black blankets, actually died. And it was after that that things changed. So what's come recently is pure awareness. I keep talking about the fact that the physical senses and the rational mind and the intellect only pick up less than 1% of information. Like everything's energy and it all carries information. So we're missing out on 99.9%. And I talked about Michael Singer, who simply talks about coming back to pure awareness, where we can let go of reactive energies and bondages with events in physical life, and it allows Shakti, or this shimmering white light, to rise through us. Joel Goldsmith talks about exactly the same thing. One of you, I'll pop it on the chat there, says, what happens when you fully understand the I am? So the I am, of course, is pure awareness. I am that I am. Wherever I place myself, I am that I am, which is extremely powerful. That's the finest frequency, I believe. It's also unconditional love because there's no judgment. So Singer talks about, R.J. Spinner talks about Spider-Man. If you can picture Spider-Man, he's standing purely in the street, and it's only when he projects a web onto a building that he's attached to it. He's actually stuck there until such time as he releases it. And so how many webs have we got attached to all sorts of things in our life? And when he detaches himself, he's free. He's out of bondage. He's out of energetic structure, if you like, with other things. So Maharishi talks about there's no God apart from you. Ram Dass talks about everything changes once you identify with being the witness of the story instead of being the actor in it. I believe that Buddha's teaching is all about awareness. And it's written that be awareness in every act and freedom will come. So to finish with, Singer simply says, if you can be okay with inside, no matter what's happening outside, you're what's called a great master. So it's lack of attachment. It's lack of involvement. It's being pure awareness, pure singular awareness. In other words, stepping back from duality. It takes an enormous amount of practice. But I've been starting with traffic, conversations with people, and just standing back as purely awareness, understanding the divinity within. I think if we keep practicing that on a daily basis, not getting entangled with any energy blockages within certainly the system, as IFS talks about, then this Shakti will rise and come through us. It's then when we connect with the 99.9%. After that death, I'm here to share with you, and it's certainly out of great compassion because there was a lot of trauma and suffering in the dark night of the soul, but we see nothing. I can reassure you there's healing rooms the size of football fields, which are made out of beautiful white marble with French horns and trumpets and any instruments sitting about 2/3 up the wall with beautiful leather chairs. There's marketplaces, there's parades, there's colleges, there's schools, phenomenal amount of vivid color, which was wrapped in unconditional love. This is when you let go of the attachments and allow Shakti to flow. I'm nothing special. We all have this ability. And as Singer said, I think we're here to leave with less attachments than what we've arrived. So thanks, Brent.
Thank you so much, David. Yeah. For some, we may not have access to awareness at times until certain developments on the path. But what a freedom it is when we can take a step back and find what in IFS they call the self. And yeah, like you're sharing there so beautifully, David. The great Sri Ramana Maharshi, his approach was to abide as the self, abide as that awareness, that presence. And what he said about Kundalini was very simple. He said, abide as the self, Kundalini Shakti will rise on its own. Yeah, will rise on its own. Thank you so much, David. Let's hear from Tom.
Two things. The first was what David said about the biblical quote, or Yahweh saying, from the mountain saying, I am that I am that I am. Just in how to pronounce that, Hebrew doesn't have punctuation, and so it's been translated as I am that I am. Well, what the hell does that mean? Put some punctuation in. I am that, period. I am. It's the same as the Hamsa mantra, which means I am that. I am that, which means, well, uh, the other thing was about, remember, Swami Muktananda about the fear of ego death. He actually, when his ego was replaced uh, by that, um, he lost control of his bodily functions and peed himself. He was so terrified because it's a death. It really feels like death and you're fully present. So anyway, just two things there that I wanted to share.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Oh, thank you so much, Tom. Yeah. These are some of the experiences that Nadia and I had talked about on her during her interview about ego dissolution and ego death. If it's okay with the others, I'm going to actually go over to Nadia and see if she has any input here uh, on the ego death and whatnot. And if Nadia, you've got something else on your mind, we want to hear about that too.
Hey everyone. Yeah, I had a really good time interviewing Brent for my research, and as y'all have said, um, that final that final event where it feels like a true physical death, I've read in some texts that death can actually happen, but I don't know if that's fear mongering or if it's real, because when it happened to me, it did. It really did feel like I was going to die. So sorry for the talking in the background. So, so after that silence, I generally went up to my room to you know, die. And my body really felt like it was going to go rigid and just let the life leave the body. But then I got back up and I felt very refreshed afterwards and very I felt like I really understood everything at that point. But either it's a psychological death or you can really go so high in your energy and your vibration that you truly can't be in the physical anymore. But to me, I feel like if you need to do something here on this physical reality, you'll just come back if you have more stuff to do, in my opinion. But yeah, what were you exactly asking me? I just wanted to share that part.
Just if you had anything to add on this idea of ego death, ego dissolution, and you've added something really beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you. And also about the teenager stuff, y'all remember that? Because after all that happened to me, I don't remember that much unless I'm forced to remember.
Yeah. I remember a lot of things from the past. It takes some energy to dig it up, but I've got lots of memories. Yeah. Yeah. And yet there's space between them. They feel I can access them, but yeah, after so many deaths and rebirths, yeah, it seems like many lifetimes ago in a sense. Yeah. Oh, thanks for sharing, Nadia. I've heard from many people with similar experiences. I think the other day I heard from somebody who, like you, was like, okay, it looks like I'm dying, went to bed, laid down, thinking, okay, it's over, and I'm okay with that. So that was, I think, in one experience, I think I heard listening to something that Matt Kahn was sharing where he said every day for a significant amount of time, he would sit on his couch and feel as if he was dying. So it was unfolding over many long days for him. And so for some, it's in a moment, a period. For some, it seems to be an ongoing experience. It varies greatly. For me, there's just been many different versions of these deaths that come and go, and another layer gets stripped, and it's like the hero's journey, right? We go round and round. It's cyclical in a sense, but yeah. death and rebirth. And I can imagine, of course, there is definitely a significant one that comes at the time of physical death as well, as we hear from so many people on, that report being with somebody in their last days. It seems as if the ego becomes very thin. They fall into a state of peace often, though not always. We don't want to romanticize it, but some, find their spiritual awakening, when they're, in their deathbed in that way. So yeah, the ego doesn't stand so much of a chance against all these different forces that are trying to dissolve it, be it spiritual practice, death, life. Let's hear from Shane.
Yeah, hi. Thank you. Thank you, Brent. Thanks for this meeting. I've loved it. And what I have to share, I may not have processed it fully, but this happened, and I'm trying to make sense of it. And I think I'm going through something where I am starting to see and feel my ancestors. And I'm Maori. I'm indigenous to New Zealand, and we were colonized by the British. And formed a treaty with them. This is rare for a country actually to form a treaty with the British Crown, offering sovereignty. And to this day, we still fight over what the conditions of that treaty really were. And ultimately, my people suffered under that treaty and diminished. So my people have lost their language, and I have been trying to, take lessons to learn it. I've been accessing Indigenous services. One of those for my well-being, and one of them is massage. It's called Miri Miri. But I recently met with the boss who runs that service, and she asked if I wanted rumi rumi, which is deep tissue. Look, I'd like to speak about this experience. It was, in some ways, it was incredibly traumatic. But I was on this table. It went for hours, and it's deep tissue massage. It's incredibly painful. And perhaps I didn't understand that, my system probably can't handle. I didn't realize that maybe Kundalini can't it's not meant to be manipulated externally. But here's what happened. Every time she touched and pushed on a point, um, I started ushering some things, and some of those things were betrayal, imposter syndrome, hatred, unforgiveness, injustice, that some of those points, and I don't know whether those things were my own lust. When she went to the stomach, there was lust, there was addiction, there is pain. I was screaming, and it was painful. And so the very next day, I got missing pieces of my whakapapa. My whakapapa is genealogy. And I found that some of my ancestors were prominent leaders in my tribe, and that we were played a critical role in installing the very first Maori king in my country. But these are things that have been missing in my life, in my heart. But these are things that have brought up trauma. And it made sense that this constant disillusion I feel at being in spaces where I feel like I'm outnumbered, cornered, and it's often spaces that are mostly white. Um, I I also felt and heard that the suffering is over. I've been in isolation for 3 years, and trying to sort of learn how to navigate this new space has been, yeah, just new. That's me. Thank you. I'm glad I got to share this.
Yeah. Shane, thank you so much. Yeah. Sounds like a lot of stuff comes up, and sometimes we have things come up that, yeah, like you're sharing, we don't know clearly if it belongs to us personally, if it's from the field collectively, our lineage, our culture. Um, but yeah, just being with it as you're sharing, they're being with it, feeling it. Very interesting. Yeah, massage is powerful. I haven't had any significant experiences myself, but I've heard from some others that have had incredible healings take place as, the work and digging into the muscles activates latent memories, emotional stuff. Yeah, and sometimes the Kundalini will call us through the flow to great healers for this type of work. Yeah, maybe it's so that we go through some of the stuff and we're not alone. We're there with somebody to hold space for us. Yeah, very interesting. Thank you so much for sharing, Shane, and sharing about your ancestry and your culture. So many great traditions that were overlooked, wiped out by you know colonialism that had such great answers and wisdom to all that we're going through here, you know. So I'm happy to hear that you're remembering um, remembering the language and the teachings is brilliant. Let's hear from Jay.
Hi, Brent. Thank you.
Hey, Jay.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what I wanted to share. There was a couple of things that came up, and I'm just trying to feel into what feels most relevant and most helpful. I guess what's relevant for me and what feels might be helpful to be expressed is just the idea that we're all so different. And even though this process seems to be one that's bringing us closer to truth, we all have different ways of getting there and different things that we have to do. And even for me, different perspectives. So there's the non-dual perspective of, pure awareness that's here, and there's nobody here. And there's a beauty in that. And there's something very nourishing. And I go there throughout the day just to be nourished by the vibrations that are there. And that's really helpful. And then sometimes I pop out of that model, that perspective, and I enter into what some might call a dualistic model, but it's just, I don't think of it like that. I go into my heart space and I call out to God to help me because I don't know what to do. Right. And sometimes I go to my parts and I talk to my parts and I comfort them and I tell them the things they need to hear. And sometimes I just sit there and don't do anything and they just let them shout and scream and let them come to rest within awareness and realize that they don't exist. And there can be like 30 ego deaths in 10 minutes as they realize that they don't exist and they fall away. And so today there's this continual process, shifting from that kind of person to their inner parts role and to the kind of resting in the no self role. And today it was kind of like as those parts all just kind of had their say and fell away into awareness, was just this perspective that I'm familiar with, but somehow it helped me. It just embodied in a way of there's a part of myself that feels that it got really traumatized by this process and it can't trust. And I've talked to you about this before, Brent. It's saying like I can't trust God or life. And I think God and life is against me because of all this, excuse my language, fucked up shit that's happened to me. So God can't be real. And I can't possibly get through this because God, if he exists or she exists, can't be benevolent and can't be on my side because of all these things that have happened. Right? And so I did some kind of parts work on them for a few days. And then I think that softened them enough that they let go to the point that they saw the non-dual. They saw, okay, I is a thought, I is a contraction, I is fear, I don't exist. And so there is no I, and then there is no God that's another. There's no God or life that's doing something to me or an I. And that just fell away. And it's like there's just this. And things are happening in this. And all this me, I versus God, God versus me is just like this tiny layer right at the top of this vast ocean of this. And this vast ocean of this is moving everything. And this body mind is this little wave that's like, And this vast ocean is going to do what it's going to do. And just somehow today, this just hit me. It's just like it integrated this non-dual realization mediated by this parts stuff, integrated into my physical soul, my body of like, hey, buddy, you really don't have to do anything. Like you can trust, like this part can trust God, can not trust God. It doesn't matter. What's really doing it is going to do it. And it's going to be easier if you just let go. Whether this part trusts or it doesn't, it's just going to be better if it relaxes because this ocean is going to do what it's going to do. So I just felt like sharing that because it's like it's not any perspective. It's like it's just whatever it is. So yeah, I just felt like sharing that. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Well, thank you, Jay. Thank you for sharing. I feel some of my own parts hearing your words, they feel relief. Oh, we don't have to do anything. And it's
Yeah,
okay if we're fighting or not fighting, it doesn't matter. And wow, what a relief. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Thanks, Jay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've got those kind of parts too, the cynical parts as well. And I found, at least in my experience, just like you, Jay, they're very cynical and they don't trust. And I found that if I can approach that part by saying, hey, it's all good that you're cynical and don't trust. Paradoxically, that actually gets them to be like, really? It is all good? And suddenly their cynicism starts dissolving in your total acceptance of them. I think that's what they're really looking for is just like acceptance, calmness, validation. Yeah. Kill them with kindness or something like that. Thanks, Jay. Let's hear from Amanda.
Yeah, thank you everyone who shared, and thanks, Jay. I feel like I just went on a ride into the ocean and coming back. Um, but yeah, I think the parts work has been really influential for me. I think like started me off here. Like my first energetic experience was doing IFS therapy and continued and was how I got through a lot of yeah, navigating a lot of this process. But something that has felt um I guess interesting to me recently is seeing the way that like the parts of myself that I have rejected, like, yeah, I feel like I'm kind of on this process of, yeah, welcoming back and in this kind of like lower, if thinking of like chakras, like both going up and like going really back to basics, like really going down to like the lowest parts of myself. Um, and seeing how that's mirrored in the world, like every couple years. Yeah, I had a really close friend from growing up who was extremely spiritual, extreme like when we were kids, like we were both extremely, imaginative, weird, spiritual, playing pretend all the time together. And then when I grew up, like had more of an ego that developed where I was like, oh, I don't want to be seen as weird. Like she became a Wiccan and I was like, no, like I'm not this. And like really separated myself and in other ways we went to different schools and like I found ways to like mask and hide myself and be safe. Whereas she like was very sensitive and went through a lot of stuff. Anyways, she's someone that I think about every couple of years of like reaching out to her. And then just like this past week, I was just thinking of her again, and an old friend was like, Have you have you talked to her? Like someone I haven't talked to in like years reached out and was like, Do you have this person's contact information? I was just thinking of her. So I'm reconnecting with her in 2 weeks. And so I've just been thinking about that in terms of like both our internal like children parts, but then also how that's mirrored and reflected in others and how we can like through relationships heal parts of ourselves who we've cast off. Um, yeah, that's all I have to say, I guess.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Amanda. Yeah, really interesting how I guess life will afford us the opportunity to go back in time and bring those relationships to us so we can have, make some reconciliation or some updates or kind of help us to unfreeze those parts that may be stuck in those times. Yeah. Fascinating. I'm be curious to hear how that goes and how your friend's journey has unfolded. That'd be interesting too. Yeah. Yeah, I've had some friends like that too, that, after years they came back around and it seems like not being in touch, despite not being in touch, we were still traveling, very similar paths spiritually. It's interesting how people come back around like that. Yeah, thanks, Amanda. Let's hear from Axel.
Hello, hope everyone's having a good day. Couple of small things. I think that one thing that's interesting is that I was hit by a completely inexplicable bout of insomnia today. I completely forgot about this meeting. And then I couldn't go to sleep and I was like, okay, I give up. And then I remembered and I was like, okay. And the first person that was sharing here was Angelina, which was really funny because one of the things that I was stressing about when I couldn't sleep was that I might talk to a doctor for the first time about Kundalini. So that's a nice like little synchronicity. That's cute. Second thing, when Shane was talking about the loss, the loss that comes with colonialism, just a film recommendation popped into my head. It's about colonialism and the effect of colonialism um, on spirituality, and it was made in Colombia with consultation from the community that was affected, with shamans from that community. It's called Embrace of the Serpent, and it's one of the saddest and genuinely most, spiritual films that, I've ever seen. And I would highly, highly recommend it to anyone. It's really touching. But it's very heavy, but it's very beautiful. Um, and then in terms of the inner child, it's not a very dramatic experience, but you know, uh, one of the first figures that I was interested in when it came to spirituality was Alan Watts, right? Because Alan Watts super accessible, great talker, um, is quite vague, and you can kind of read what you want into him. But so charismatic, right? Such a charismatic speaker, so accessible. Anyway, and then eventually, like I'm a books guy, right? And eventually I went to the primary sources, right? And I read, Shanti Deva, and I read the works of Saint Teresa of Avila, across the traditions. Not a massive amount, but these, I guess, very serious mystics. These very serious texts. And yesterday I was like, I haven't listened to Alan Watts in a while, and I listened to Alan Watts, and it's very humbling that this guy who I kind of like relegated to being this pop science, popularizer of spirituality, that guy like hit so hard on such a level, even more than some of these mystics. And to be honest, I'm still struggling with it because I feel like the universe is calling me to be an Alan Watts guy, but I don't, there's like an egotic barrier that I'm like, I don't want to be a guy who's into Alan Watts. I want to be a guy who's into like Saint John of the Cross, like that's way cooler. Um, but there's some like childish there and like connecting with a figure who I was into when I used to like smoke weed when I was 18, right? It's a very different thing. But I'm very resistant to it right now. Like it's gonna be a while before I accept this. And then if I could finish, it's just a very short poem from Rumi's Masnawi, by Joid Mojadedi. And I have a tattoo on this exact verse. This is from The Healing of the Sixth Slave Girl. Um, and it's about love, and this is the lover's monologue, so it's approximately a sonnet in length. Are you familiar with this, Brent?
Somewhat. Not as much as
Okay.
you, definitely.
Well, it's six. So for context, this poem is 6 books long, so it's quite a long poem. But this is my favorite. This is, I think, the maybe well. Being a lover means your heart must ache. No sickness hurts as much as when hearts break. The lover's ailment's totally unique. Love is the astrolabe of all we seek. Whether you feel divine or earthly love, ultimately we're destined for above. To capture love, whatever words I say make me ashamed when love arrives my way. Well, explanation sometimes makes things clear. True love through silence, only one can hear. The pen would smoothly write the things it knew, but when it came to love, it split in two. A donkey stuck in mud is logic's fate. Love's nature, only love can demonstrate.
Beautiful.
There you go.
Oh, thank you, Axel. Thank you. Mm. Alicia shares here. Wow, that poem brought tears to my eyes.
It's the Masnawi.
Yeah, Alan Watts. Amanda says, you're given spiritual hipster energy, right? You want to be into the obscure stuff and not to the mainstream stuff. But Alan Watts is, he's should be celebrated for being able to so well translate those Eastern ideas for a Western audience. He was one of the first to ever do it, and really turned a lot of people onto the path for that. So yeah,
Well, he's a rascal as well,
yeah,
and I think that and he's a guy that, a big theme on my path personally has been struggling between institutional religion and like a more free-flowing approach because I've not been able to reject institutional religion as when I've listened to, in these meetings that, I get the sense a lot of people um are distant from institutional religion. I'm not distant to it. I'm close to it, but I struggle with it. And I relate to Alan Watts on that level because he also almost became a priest. He studied to become a priest, whilst there was also this really free flowing current within him. And that specific tension is not one I've seen like a lot of spiritual figures have. They all seem to like I say, all most of them seem to either be pretty settled into tradition or be very free flowing. And to relate to a guy that has that same tension, I think is
yeah,
very powerful.
yeah, very interesting. Yeah, it's an interesting tension. And I guess the times um, change as well, right? We have access to so much. We can be a little bit more easily free flowing with the internet and whatnot, compared to times where you basically only had your local religion to get involved with. So it's interesting. Yeah, thanks for sharing, Axel. So we hear from Nadia and David in a second, but I just want to go over to the YouTube chat here. So Lana on YouTube shares here, my Kundalini awakening pretty much started 3 weeks ago. The Kriyas have stopped, and now I'm directly communicating with higher self as she shakes or nods my head to questions. What stage is this? So very, very interesting. So at least in the way that I see this process, we don't really have clear, very outlined stages of the process. It varies greatly for everybody. We all go through this a little differently. If we were to compare this to, the formation of a baby in the womb and that type of birth and puberty, I would say it's more like puberty. Both processes are, carried out by an intelligence within the body, a great wisdom. But puberty happens a little bit more in a unique way for everybody. And so, yeah, there are particular stages of puberty, but they vary greatly. Whereas childbirth, it's, specific, developments that happen at, week 1, week 8, whatever, right? So it's more like puberty. It happens in very different ways. But when what you're sharing here, it's only been 3 weeks, which is very, very early. And yet here you are in this community, you're using the right language, referring to, the Kriyas, and you're saying that you're communicating with your higher self as she shakes or nods to my question. So in only 3 weeks, you've even got the language. I mean, for 2 weeks, I didn't even know what the heck was happening to me. I've met people for years, they don't know what's even happening to them. And so here you are. So that's great. Not only that, you've made contact and direct contact with some sort of higher intelligence, what we may call the Shakti, you're referring to her as she, as your higher intelligence, higher self, different ways of thinking about it, but you've made contact with something. And so that relationship, in the way that I see it, that relationship is key, and that will take you all the way. Um, that relationship, you could even argue, is the end stage of the process, because this is, if we look at it as a form of yoga, union with the divine, you're making contact with the divine as you relate with her in this way, as she's using your system and communicating with you, yes, no, to your questions and the themes that are coming up. So that connection, you could say, you've made contact. Now it's just never deepening of that relationship, which will carry out over the duration of your journey. And so um, you can trust in those answers that come through. Yes, no. Many people report that they discover this, that they can actually um, ask these questions and get responses. Should I read this book? Yes, no. Should I eat this food? Yes, no. And their body will respond in some way. Now, I've met many people who that begins to happen at certain points in the journey, and then suddenly it either stops, and that brings distress. They say, "Oh my gosh, it stopped. I had, the access to infinite intelligence at my fingertips, and now I don't. Something has gone wrong." It's just something that happens at times. Or sometimes, of course, naturally you get to be a little curious. You start asking, uh, particular questions, and you don't get a response, or you get unclear responses, and that can also be a little distressing as well, right? So, you might ask, what are the lottery numbers going to be this week? And is it going to be this? Is it going to be that? Yes, no, yes, no. And you're going to get conflicting data. So normally the information that comes through is what's necessary for you to move forward on your spiritual path. Now, if winning the lottery is necessary for that, well, then perhaps you'll get the answer to that. But generally speaking, we use it for very innocent, straightforward questions just to navigate our journey, to understand a little bit about, what's our next step. And it also brings us into connection with this infinite intelligence. So developing a relationship, it's like any relationship. It begins, it's fresh, it's new, it's exciting. So you've got to, foster it and explore. But Lana, it sounds like you're well on your way, very well on your way. Keep doing what you're doing. And yeah, thanks for being here. That Scott shared here, but briefly. I'm Scott. I had a profound Kundalini activation September 2020. My energy centers got hit like a bolt of lightning. They made a sound like piano keys, a four shot upwards like a fireman's hose. Yeah, far out. Yeah. And Scott shares lots, but then he closes here with, I don't feel so alone anymore. What happened to me was real. People around me thought I was crazy, but I don't care. Yeah. Well, we don't think you're crazy, Scott. Thanks for being here with us.
I just feel like I need to speak for Jay when he said that he can't trust himself, he can't trust the world or God. And once you build up self-trust and then you know yourself as the world and as God, then you will feel much better. And I remember I went through that point too. And looking back at it, I don't want to like invalidate my own past memories or emotions and stuff like that. But then I realized that I had it within me the whole time, and I just had to learn how to be that rock for myself and not look to the outside to make me feel better about things that may have traumatized me. Because even if other people don't believe you about your experiences, you have to do that for yourself. Because even if everybody else validates you, you'll still feel like crap if you don't feel that way within. So, yeah, that's my biggest piece.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Nadia. Yeah. Yeah. It's a known thing in IFS work, like Nadia was sharing here, that some of the parts aren't going to trust the self. Yeah. They're apprehensive, and understandably so, based on all the things that we've gone through, and yeah, developing that relationship with them. Yeah. Great insight, Nadia. So let's hear from David, and then we'll begin to
Yeah, thanks, Brett.
wrap
I'd
here.
like to ditto what Nadia said as well. I have great honor for Jay's story that really resonates. So beautiful. And that's really dovetailing what I was talking about from these teachers that are coming back to awareness. Maharishi again says there's no God who is apart from you. So we are all fractals of the whole. There's no separation. I am that. So Singer says beautifully, if you can practice being awareness in the waking life, you transcend the absurdity that this world outside is not even there. In Cern in France, on the border of Switzerland, there's colliders which are miles long. They're just building one which will be finished in 2070, which is 91 kilometres round. And they've proven that beyond this physical illusion, this temporary illusion, is shimmering white light, Shakti. So if we stay at pure awareness, all the answers come through in the awareness. Just like when you started your story, Brent, right at the beginning of this session, that came from non-physical, from your awareness. Everything does. It's all born from that. So I think if we return to that, the suffering stops, because that's the true identity, without any attachments or bondage. It's a beautiful knowing. Thanks, Brent.
Oh, thank you, David. Yeah. Thank you for pointing us back to our true nature, where there's deep freedom, detachment.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you all so much for being here with us all tonight. I appreciate you all so much. Thanks for being here, for all of your support for each other, for me, all of your engagement online, your subscriptions and your donations go a very long way for me. Thank you so, so much. Like I was saying, you can look out soon for the 10-year post Kundalini Rising video that I'll be putting out. So you can check that out. Kundalini Q&A meeting tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern. You're welcome to join. brentspirit.com/Kundalini Q&A to register. Got some openings for some meetings one-to-one if you'd like to meet with me to go deep on Zoom. Check it out. Appreciate you all so much. Thank you for being here. This is a great call. We covered a lot of ground, lots of great shares. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.